as they get ready to listen also to the Israeli Prime Minister speak. You can see House Speaker Mike Johnson there. Once you see him up in the chair, you pretty much know that things are going to get rolling soon. Jay, have you had a chance to talk to various lawmakers that are not only going to be in the room, but what? Are we up to about 50 or so that say they're not going?
Well, our count is at least 50, but we're expecting it to be much more as we just look at the attendance in that room. Just to narrate what it is that you're looking at. So Mike Johnson is there at the Speaker's rostrum. Next to him is Ben Cardin, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Kamala Harris would normally sit in the chair that Cardin is going to be in, but the vice president is campaigning today, or actually giving an official remarks in Indianapolis. And obviously, we also know on the flip side of that, that J.D. Vance, the Republican nominee for vice president now, also not going to be in that room because the Trump campaign says that he has commitments. So it's going to be Mike Johnson, Ben Cardin at the Speaker's rostrum, and then standing between them, a little bit below them, think about that image of the State of the Union. It's going to look very similar, will be Benjamin Netanyahu addressing this joint meeting of Congress. We also know that in that 50 or so lawmakers, the majority of whom are House Democrats, that are not going to be there. There are some notable names, and one of them is former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is not going to be in that room today. Jim Clyburn, another notable Democrat, top Biden ally, he is not going to be in that room today. Exactly why certain Democrats are not going to be there runs the gamut. Some have said that they have deep disagreements with Netanyahu on policy. Some have gone so far, these are progressive Democrats, to say that they believe that he is a war criminal. But there are a number of Democrats who are not going to be there in protest, Kira.
I'm also being told Representative Rashida Tlaib is in the room with a Palestinian guest. As we know, she's the only Palestinian-American member of Congress. That's interesting to note, Jay.
It is, and we've also heard, as it relates to guests, by the way, that some of those members who are not going to be there are giving their guest tickets, because members get tickets that allow guests of theirs to come and watch these remarks, are giving their guest tickets not just to Palestinian Americans in the case of Congresswoman Tlaib, but also to hostage families, families of those who are held hostage in Gaza, some of whom have been deeply critical of Netanyahu, and so it creates this atmosphere where there possibly could be some interruptions of Netanyahu, which would obviously raise the temperature in that room, because Mike Johnson has said he will not tolerate interruptions. Kira.
Talk about raising the temperature. Matt Gutman is just outside the Capitol Hill there where you are. Apparently protests picking up. Matt Gutman, what's going on?
Hey, Kira. Well, we were at that protest, as you saw. It was a rally earlier. They began marching up Constitution Ave. Just beyond the trees over there is the Capitol, where Netanyahu is about to speak. And the protesters demand to get through this line of police officers on bikes. They went right up to the front, began pushing. Then some projectiles were thrown, more like water bottles. And then police opened up with pepper spray, and there was this fisticuffs. We've seen a pretty significant reinforcement of officers' tactical teams. They're officers with paintball guns over there. They've been pushing people back, and all of us have pretty much gotten a face full of bear spray or pepper spray at this point. Doesn't seem like the protesters are backing down at this point, even though the bulk of the march, I'm just going to spin for 1 sec, has now continued to proceed down towards Union Station. But there's a pretty solid group here that looks like they do not want to back down. This is exactly what officers here in security have been worried about. That's why there are so many thousands of security personnel, not only from Capitol Police, Metro Police, but as far as the NYPD, who are here trying to keep the peace. Doesn't look like they're going to get far, and no actual violence, just a bit of pushing and shoving here, Kira, mostly. But it doesn't seem like this is going to end in the next couple of minutes.
Matt, I mean, the first thing I'm thinking about, and I know everybody's going to want to have a voice here because they see that you're live. If you feel in any way you need to move, or this gentleman next to you is bothering you, please let us know, Matt, because your safety is #1. All right, so just, yeah, gut check me on that, please. But you think about, you just, okay, you're okay? Okay. So looking at this scene,
we're okay,
yeah,
Kira.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. So here's my question for you, Matt. I'm looking at this situation, and I can't help but think of Insurrection Day, right, where it was total chaos, and protesters were able to storm the Capitol. And, well, we know what happened at that point. Do you see a big difference in operations right now? I mean, clearly, just looking behind you at the assets, you know, they're prepared for anything, it looks like. So, yeah, show me.
I mean, a massive security array here. And this is what they had been planning for. There has been a tremendous amount of trauma caused by January 6th. And the Capitol Police feel it, staffers inside the Capitol feel it, and the Secret Service, Capitol Police, Metro, we're not going to let this happen again. We just want to see the security right behind us. Thank you. And so what they've been trying to do is ensure that this did not happen again. And that's why we've seen so many of the law enforcement presence here. And their barricades, what they're trying to do most, Kira, is prevent them from even getting close, because once they get close, then they can breach the barricades more easily and get around. So they're really keeping an enormously wide perimeter, something that this city has not seen perhaps ever since the inauguration. So yes, this is what they've been trying to do. But because of what's being catcalled out, I think I'm going to toss it back to you, Kira.
Yep, absolutely. I agree, Matt. And I can see our security is with you, which is good. Keep us posted. But number one, your safety is the most important.
They've been great.
Yep. Yes, they are. All right, Matt, thank you. Let's take it inside Capitol Hill. Jay O'Brien, and just thinking about what we went through on Insurrection Day makes me nervous just seeing Matt in the crowd. But, you know, it looks like, you know, all the proper security forces are set there. We'll monitor that. But, Jay, what's it like inside? What's the security like inside, the tone, the feeling? I mean, you're the one, you and Ian were able to show us firsthand the protests that were happening inside. Remind me, was it the Cannon building as they were getting ready for, well, protesting prior to Netanyahu coming in to speak today? Sort of give me a feel kind of from yesterday to today. What's it like inside at this moment?
So the Capitol today is closed to anyone who does not work here. You need a badge to get into the Capitol. Yesterday was not the case, and it's why those demonstrators chose yesterday to demonstrate here in the Cannon House Office Building, which is where we are, which is part of the Capitol complex. They actually demonstrated, you can see it kind of right below me in this rotunda here. We were the ones who got video of them standing here looking down. Today in the Capitol, can't get in unless you work here or if you're a member of the press. The other thing that's different today than yesterday is that the metal barricades that surround the Capitol, which came up in the immediate aftermath of the January 6th Capitol attack, remember, the Capitol was fenced off for quite some time after that day, those are up as well. So there is this metal perimeter around the Capitol building itself, which is where, obviously, Netanyahu will be. The House chamber, which you're looking at now, where Netanyahu is going to speak, is part of the Capitol building itself. If you're looking at it from the street where Gutman is, it's on the right side of the Capitol. There's metal barricades up all around that building. So security is incredibly tight. And to Matt's point, they've brought in other law enforcement agencies from as far north as New York to supplement Capitol Police to, control the situation a little bit further away from the Capitol. Matt is actually quite some distance away from the Capitol building. He's somewhat down the street from it. So they have law enforcement to control that situation. And then, of course, Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies, both federal, state, and local from various municipalities, guarding the Capitol building itself. So security is incredibly tight here, Karen.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, Jay, because I couldn't really get a sense from where exactly Matt was. Can you sort of, to the best of your ability, just sort of explain so we all know with regard to the perimeter, the security perimeter, how far back those police officers are and those barricades are? Is it a pretty long ways from the steps of the Capitol?
Yeah, the last I saw in Matt's image is that they were kind of a little bit further past what we would call the base of Capitol Hill. So Capitol Hill is a hill, right? And so if you can see the slope of Capitol Hill, which I think I saw in Matt's shot, you are somewhat far away from it. So the Capitol is a complex. There are office buildings in the Capitol, which the various members of Congress and their staff work in. And then there is the Capitol building itself, which sits kind of in the middle of the complex. And then you also have the Supreme Court and the Library of Congress, which sit behind the Capitol building. It looks like Matt is down the hill from the Capitol complex, and it looks like the police perimeter where the demonstrations are going to happen kind of starts there, somewhat near, if you know D.C. at all, and you do, Keir, of course, the National Mall. That's what looks like where those demonstrations are occurring. And you heard Matt indicate that the demonstrators wanted to get closer to the Capitol building, to be closer to Benjamin Netanyahu, where he is going to speak any minute from now in the House chamber. And the police are obviously, as Matt indicated in his reporting there, trying to prevent that and keeping them a good distance away from the Capitol building.
So I'm getting word that we may be seeing Netanyahu at any moment, Jay. So I'm going to take a question to Chris so you could sort of check in to see on timing. You have a monitor there too, right, Jay? So you can see the same live shot I'm looking at. Okay, great. All right, let us know if you think you have eyes on Netanyahu, and I'll monitor this live picture as well. But it does seem like it could be happening any moment now as we are starting to reach the top of the hour when he is indeed supposed to speak. It looks like, for the most part, things are running on time. So Chris, let me just talk to you while we wait to see Netanyahu. I guess first, I would love to know your take on the situation we just saw outside with Matt Gutman and the security, and what a different look from what we've seen in the past when leaders of various countries have come to visit. I mean, we sure learned a lot from January 6th, didn't we, in Insurrection Day with regard to being prepared when certain leaders are coming to town. And it's a volatile time in the region. And of course, politically too, where lawmakers and voters and in both countries are very divided.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we've seen an evolution. There were many, many lessons learned in terms of physical security as a result of January 6th. I reflect back as a little boy watching protests here in Washington, D.C. as a visitor, as a tourist, watching protests play out during the Vietnam War. So my mind races back to those days. But at the same time, individuals have the right for peaceful protests. So to be sure, some of that is happening, and some people will escalate and become violent, and I believe they'll be taken care of by law enforcement.
As we wait for Netanyahu to speak, just overall, talk to us about how you think his speech today will impact over the overall region. Who else do you think is going to be paying close attention to what Netanyahu says? When I talk about, well, when I'm referring to other key leaders of countries that border Israel, but also, you know, bad actors.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because there are multiple audiences that the prime minister will reach. In fact, any national leader has to talk to multiple audiences. That includes the threat you're dealing with, which means Hamas. Negotiators are going to be listening. Of course, Arab countries are going to listen intently. Even people watching the United States, policy watchers in terms of how is the United States handling great power competition. All of these things are important and are intertwined with the audiences, right? How is the United States responding to the crisis in Gaza and Israel? How would the United States respond in a crisis in Taiwan? I think it's interwoven, and Netanyahu in particular is laying out the groundwork for maybe future peace in the region and stability. We will see. But in terms of his focus today, it's going to be talking about why Israel has prosecuted a campaign the way they had to prosecute the campaign. We're going to hear from him in probably very direct terms on the kinds of threats that Israel has had to reconcile as a result of the attacks that took place on October 7th. But all of this is linked to regional security and, frankly, the United States prestige as well. But Prime Minister Netanyahu also has to speak to the body politic today. He is addressing a bipartisan session of Congress. So first and foremost, that is his principal audience today. But he's also speaking to Palestinians. So it is a tall order to reach all of those audiences.
And just to add to a little more color there in the room, Jay O'Brien, I understand some of the members there are wearing yellow flag pins in recognition of the hostages still being held by Hamas. Also, I see that as the chamber is preparing for Netanyahu's address to begin, 30 Senate Democrats have been identified. That means that 21 members of the Senate Democratic Conference are missing in attendance today as we look at these live pictures. Also, something to note here, Senator Mark Kelly, as you know, a potential vice presidential pick for Vice President Kamala Harris in her presidential campaign, is seated in the second row. So we did make note that Kamala Harris is not there. The vice president is not there. But surely she has those that she is close to and considering to bring aboard with her on the ticket in the room, representing and reporting back. Okay, I'm being told now that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, is entering the room. Let's go ahead and listen in. Jay O'Brien, are you noticing who's shaking hands, who is not shaking hands? Chuck Schumer did not shake the prime minister's hand. And then we did see a quick shot of Senator Mark Kelly as well there, right behind Schumer. Okay, it looks like he's going to step right to the mic, Jay. But before he starts speaking, what do you make of him, of Schumer not shaking his hand?
That was chilly very quickly. Chuck Schumer is someone who's called for new leadership in Israel. He's made no secret that he has deep disagreements with Benjamin Netanyahu, and those two just snubbed each other, Kira.
All right, let's go ahead and listen in. It sounds like he's getting ready to start talking.
Members of Congress, I now have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Senator Ben Cardin, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senators, members of Congress, distinguished guests. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the profound honor of addressing this great citadel of democracy for the fourth time. We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together. Because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose. And my friends, I came to assure you today of one thing: we will win. Ladies and gentlemen, like December 7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001, October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy. It was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It began as a perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. Thousands of young Israelis were celebrating at an outdoor music festival. And suddenly, at 6:29 a.m., as children were still sleeping soundly in their beds in the towns and kibbutzim next to Gaza, suddenly heaven turned into hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people from 41 countries, including 39 Americans. Proportionately, compared to our population size, that's like 20 9/11s in one day. And these monsters, they raped women, they beheaded men, they burned babies alive, they killed parents in front of their children, and children in front of their parents. They dragged 255 people, both living and dead, into the dark dungeons of Gaza. Israel has already brought home 135 of these hostages, including 7 who were freed in daring rescue operations. One of those freed hostages, Noor Gamani, is here in the gallery, sitting near my wife, Sarah. On the morning On the morning of October 7th, the entire world saw Noah's look of desperation as she was violently abducted to Gaza on the back of a motorcycle. I met Noah's mother, Leora, a few months ago. She was dying of cancer. She said to me, "Prime Minister, I have one final wish. I wish to hug my daughter Noah one last time before I die." 2 months ago, I authorized a breathtaking commando rescue operation. Our special forces, including a heroic officer named Arnonz Mora, who fell in this battle, rescued Noah and 3 other hostages. Noah, I think it's one of the most moving things. When Noah was reunited with her mother, Leora, and her mother's last wish came true. Noah, we're so thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you. Many hostage families are also here with us today, including Eliyahu Bibas. Eliyahu Bibas is the grandfather of those 2 beautiful red-headed boys, the Bibas boys, toddlers. And they were taken hostage with their mother and and Eliyahu's son. The entire family was taken hostage. 2 beautiful red-haired children taken hostage. What monsters. And with us also is Iris Chaim, whose son Yotam bravely escaped Hamas captivity with 2 other Israelis, and tragically they were killed making their way back to our lines. We have with us also the families of American hostages. They're here. The pain these families have endured is beyond words. I met with them again yesterday, and I promised them this: I will not rest until all their loved ones are home, all of them. As we speak, we're actively engaged in intensive efforts to secure their release, and I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now. I want to thank President Biden for his tireless efforts on behalf of the hostages and for his efforts to the hostage families as well. I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten. President Biden and I have known each other for over 40 years. I want to thank him for half a century of friendship to Israel and for being, as he says, a proud Zionist. Actually, he says a proud Irish-American Zionist. My friends, for more than 9 months, Israel's soldiers have shown boundless courage. With us today, is Lieutenant Avichai Reuven. Avichai is an officer in the Israeli paratroopers. His family immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia. In the early hours of October 7th, Avichai heard the news of Hamas's bloody rampage. He put on his uniform, grabbed his rifle, but he didn't have a car. So he ran 8 miles to the front lines of Gaza to defend his people. You heard that right. He ran 8 miles, came to the front lines, killed many terrorists, and saved many, many lives. Avichai, we all honor your remarkable heroism. Another Israeli is with us here today, and he's stand up right next to Avichai. This is Master Sergeant Ashraf al-Bakhiri. Ashraf is a Bedouin soldier from the Israeli Muslim community of Raat. On October 7th, Ashraf too killed many terrorists. First, he defended his comrades in the military base, and he then rushed to defend the neighboring communities, including the devastated community of Kibbutz Be'eri. Like Ashraf, the Muslim soldiers of the IDF fought alongside their Jewish, Druze, Christian, and other comrades in arms with tremendous bravery. A third hero, Lieutenant Asa Sofer, is also here with us. Asa fought as an officer in the Tank Corps, and he was wounded in battle. He was wounded in battle while protecting his fellow soldiers from a grenade. He lost his right arm and the vision in his left eye. He's recovering, and incredibly, within a short time, Asa will soon return to active duty as a commander of a tank company. I just learned there is a fourth hero here, Lieutenant Jonathan Ben Chamo, who lost a leg in Gaza and continued to fight. My friends, these are the soldiers of Israel, unbowed, undaunted, unafraid. As the Bible says, Am kelavi yakum. They shall rise like lions. They have risen like lions. The lions of Judah, the lions of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, the men and women of the IDF come from every corner of Israeli society, every ethnicity, every color, every creed, left and right, religious and secular. All are imbued with the indomitable spirit of the Maccabees, the legendary Jewish warriors of antiquity. With us today is Yechiel Leiter, the father of one of those Maccabees. Yechiel's father escaped the Holocaust and found refuge in America. As a young man, Yechiel moved to Israel and raised a family of 8 children. He named his eldest son, Moshe, after his late father. Moshe became an exemplary officer in one of our elite commando units. He served with distinction for 2 decades while raising 6 beautiful children of his own. On October 7th, Moshe volunteered to return to combat. 4 weeks later, he was killed when a booby-trapped mine exploded in a tunnel shaft right next to a mosque. At his son's funeral, Yechiel said this: "If the state of Israel had not been established after the Holocaust, the image engraved in our collective memory would have been the photograph of that helpless Jewish boy in the Warsaw Ghetto holding his hands up in the air with Nazi rifles pointed at him. But because of the birth of Israel," Yechiel continued, "because of the courage of soldiers like my son Moshe, the Jewish people are no longer helpless in the face of our enemies." Yechiel, please rise so we can honor your son's sacrifice. And I pledge to you and to all the bereaved families of Israel, some of whom are in this hall today, the sacrifice of your loved ones will not be in vain. It will not be in vain, because for Israel, never again must never be an empty promise. It must always remain a sacred vow. And after October 7th, never again is now. My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home. The parents hid the children, the 2 babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murdered the families, the parents. They found the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters, stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves. They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas. We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America. They want to disrupt America. So these protesters burn American flags even on the 4th of July. And I wish to salute the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who protected the American flag against these anti-Israel protesters. For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. Some of these protesters, it's amazing, absolutely amazing. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC. These protesters chant from the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about. They not only get an F in geography, they get an F in history. They call Israel a colonialist state. Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled? For nearly 4,000 years, the land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home. It's not only the campus protesters who get it wrong. It's also the people who run those campuses. 80 years after the Holocaust, the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and I'm ashamed to say my alma mater, MIT, couldn't bring themselves to condemn the calls for the genocide of Jews. You remember what they said? They said, it depends on the context. Well, let me give these befuddled academics a little context. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred. For centuries, the massacre of Jews was always preceded by wild accusations. We were accused of everything from poisoning wells to spreading plagues, to using the blood of slaughtered children to bake Passover matzahs. These preposterous anti-Semitic lies led to persecution, mass murder, and ultimately to history's worst genocide, the Holocaust. Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, Malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state. No, don't applaud. Listen. The outrageous slanders that paint Israel as racist and genocidal are meant to delegitimize Israel, to demonize the Jewish state, and to demonize Jews everywhere. And no wonder we've witnessed an appalling rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. My friends, whenever and wherever we see the scourge of anti-Semitism, we must unequivocally condemn it and resolutely fight it, without exception. And don't be fooled when the blood libels against the Jewish state come from people who wear fancy silk robes and speak in lofty tones about law and justice. Here's a case in point. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has shamefully accused Israel of deliberately starving the people of Gaza. This is utter, complete nonsense. It's a complete fabrication. Israel has enabled more than 40,000 aid trucks to enter Gaza. That's 500,000 tons of food, and that's more than 3,000 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. If there are Palestinians in Gaza who aren't getting enough food, it's not because Israel is blocking it, it's because Hamas is stealing it. So much for that lie, but here's another. The ICC prosecutor accuses Israel of deliberately targeting civilians. What in God's green earth is he talking about? The IDF has dropped millions of flyers, sent millions of text messages, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. But at the same time, Hamas does everything in its power to put Palestinian civilians in harm's way. They fire rockets from schools, from hospitals, from mosques. They even shoot their own people when they try to leave the war zone. A senior Hamas official, Fatri Hamad, boasted, listen to this, he boasted that Palestinian women and children excel at being human shields. His words, excel at being human shields. What monstrous evil. For Israel, every civilian death is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. They actually want Palestinian civilians to die so that Israel will be smeared in the international media and be pressured to end the war before it's won. This would enable Hamas to survive another day and, as they vowed, to carry out October 7th again and again and again. Well, I want to assure you, no matter what pressure is brought to bear, I will never allow that to happen. The vast majority of Americans have not fallen for this Hamas propaganda. They continue to support Israel. And I want to say thank you, America, and thank you, senators and House members who continue to support us, continue to support Israel, continue to support the truth and see through the lies. But as for the minority that may have fallen for Hamas's cons job, I suggest you listen to Colonel John Spencer. John Spencer is head of urban warfare studies at West Point. He studied every major urban conflict. I was going to say in modern history. He corrected me, no, in history. Israel, he said, has implemented more precautions to prevent civilian harm than any military in history and beyond what international law requires. That's why, despite all the lies you've heard, the war in Gaza has one of the lowest ratios of combatants to non-combatants casualties in the history of urban warfare. And you want to know where it's lowest in Gaza? It's lowest in Rafah. In Rafah. Remember what so many people said? If Israel goes into Rafah, there'll be thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of civilians killed. Well, last week, I went into Rafah. I visited our troops as they finished fighting Hamas's remaining terrorist battalions. I asked the commander there, how many terrorists did you take out in Rafah? He gave me an exact number, 1,203. I asked him, how many civilians were killed? He said, Prime Minister, practically none, with the exception of a single incident where shrapnel from a bomb hit a Hamas weapons depot and unintentionally killed 24 people. The answer is practically none. You want to know why? Because Israel got the civilians out of harm's way, something people said we could never do, but we did it. These heroes here today, the heroic soldiers of Israel, should not be condemned for how they're conducting the war in Gaza. They should be commended for it. I want to thank all of you here today who forcefully opposed the false accusations of the ICC and stood up for the truth. These lies are not only libelous, they're downright dangerous. The ICC is trying to shackle Israel's hands and prevent us from defending ourselves. And if Israel's hands are tied, America is next. And I'll tell you what else is next. The ability of all democracies to fight terrorism will be imperiled. That's what's on the line. So let me assure you, the hands of the Jewish state will never be shackled. Israel will always defend itself. My friends, in the Middle East, Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing. And that should come as no surprise. When he founded the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khomeini pledged, "We will export our revolution to the entire world." We will export the Islamic revolution to the entire world. Now ask yourself, which country ultimately stands in the way of Iran's maniacal plans to impose radical Islam on the world? And the answer is clear. It's America, the guardian of Western civilization and the world's greatest power. That's why Iran sees America as its greatest enemy. Last month, we heard a revealing comment, ostensibly about the war in Gaza, but about something else. It came from the foreign minister of Iran's proxy, Hezbollah, and he said this: "This is not a war with Israel. Israel," he said, "is merely a tool. The main war, the real war, is with America." Iran's regime has been fighting America from the moment it came to power. In 1979, it stormed the American embassy. It held scores of Americans hostage for 444 days. Since then, Iran's terrorist proxies have targeted America in the Middle East and beyond. In Beirut, they killed 241 U.S. servicemen. In Africa, they bombed American embassies. In Iraq, they supplied explosives to maim and kill thousands of American soldiers. In America, they actually sent death squads. They sent death squads here to murder a former Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor. And as we recently learned, they even brazenly threatened to assassinate President Trump. But Iran understands that to truly challenge America, it must first conquer the Middle East. And for this, it uses its many proxies, including the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Yet in the heart of the Middle East, standing in Iran's way, is one proud pro-American democracy, my country, the State of Israel. That's why the mobs in Tehran chant death to Israel before they chant death to America. For Iran, Israel is first, America is next. So when Israel fights Hamas, we're fighting Iran. When we fight Hezbollah, we're fighting Iran. When we fight the Houthis, we're fighting Iran. And when we fight Iran, we're fighting the most radical and murderous enemy of the United States of America. And one more thing. When Israel acts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons that could destroy Israel and threaten every American city, every city that you come from, we're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you. My friends, if you remember one thing from the speech, remember this. Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory. Ladies and gentlemen, that victory is in sight. Israel's defeat of Hamas will be a powerful blow to Iran's axis of terror. Another part of that axis, Hezbollah, attacked Israel on October 8th, a day after the Hamas attack. It has launched thousands of missiles and drones against us. 80,000 of our citizens in northern Israel evacuated their homes, becoming effectively refugees in their own land. We are committed to returning them home. We prefer to achieve this diplomatically. But let me be clear. Israel will do whatever it must do to restore security to our northern border and return our people safely to their homes. Last Friday, a third Iranian proxy, the Houthis, attacked Tel Aviv with a deadly drone. It exploded a few hundred feet from the American consulate, killing one person and injuring 9. On Saturday, I authorized a swift response to that attack. All our enemies should know this. Those who attack Israel will pay a very heavy price. And as we defend ourselves, on all fronts, I know that America has our back, and I thank you for it. All sides of the aisle, thank you. My friends, for decades, America has provided Israel with generous military assistance, and a grateful Israel has provided America with critical intelligence that saved many lives. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth. I choose my words carefully. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth that help protect both our countries. And we also help keep American boots, we help keep Americans' boots off the ground while protecting our shared interests in the Middle East. I deeply appreciate America's support, including in this current war. But this is an exceptional moment. Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. In World War II, as Britain fought on the front lines of civilization, Winston Churchill appealed to Americans with these famous words: "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." Today, as Israel fights on the front line of civilization, I too appeal to America. Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster. My dear friends, the war in Gaza could end tomorrow if Hamas surrenders, disarms, and returns all the hostages. But if they don't, Israel will fight until we destroy Hamas's military capabilities, end its rule in Gaza, and bring all our hostages home. That's what total victory means, and we will settle for nothing less. The day after we defeat Hamas, a new Gaza can emerge. My vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. Gaza should have a civilian administration run by Palestinians who do not seek to destroy Israel. That's not too much to ask. It's a fundamental thing that we have a right to demand and to receive. A new generation of Palestinians must no longer be taught to hate Jews, but rather to live in peace with us. Those twin words, demilitarization and de-radicalization, those two concepts were applied to Germany and Japan after World War II, and that led to decades of peace, prosperity, and security. Following our victory, with the help of regional partners, the demilitarization and de-radicalization of Gaza can also lead to a future of security, prosperity, and peace. That's my vision for Gaza. Now, here's my vision for the broader Middle East. It's also shaped in part by what we saw in the aftermath of World War II. After that war, America forged a security alliance in Europe to counter the growing Soviet threat. Likewise, America and Israel today can forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter the growing Iranian threat. All countries that are at peace with Israel and all those countries who will make peace with Israel should be invited to join this alliance. We saw a glimpse of that potential alliance on April 14th. Led by the United States, more than half a dozen nations worked alongside Israel to help neutralize hundreds of missiles and drones launched by Iran against us. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing that coalition together. The new alliance I envision would be a natural extension of the groundbreaking Abraham Accords. Those accords saw peace forged between Israel and 4 Arab countries, and they were supported by Republicans and Democrats alike. We could call, I have a name for this new alliance. I think we should call it the Abraham Alliance. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in brokering the historic Abraham Accords. Like Americans, Israelis were relieved that President Trump emerged safe and sound from that dastardly attack on him, dastardly attack on American democracy. There is no room for political violence in democracies. I also want to thank President Trump for all the things he did for Israel, from recognizing Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, to confronting Iran's aggression, to recognizing Jerusalem as our capital and moving the American embassy there. That's Jerusalem, our eternal capital, never to be divided again. My dear friends, Democrats and Republicans, despite these times of upheaval, I'm hopeful about the future. I'm hopeful about Israel because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell, from dispossession and genocide. And against all odds, we restored our sovereignty in our ancient homeland. We built a powerful and vibrant democracy, a democracy that pushes the boundaries of innovation for the betterment of all humanity. I'm hopeful about America because I'm hopeful about Americans. I know how much the people of this country have sacrificed to defend freedom. America will continue to be a force for light and good in a dark and dangerous world. For free peoples everywhere, America remains the beacon of liberty its extraordinary founders envisioned back in 1776. Working together, I'm confident that our two nations will vanquish the tyrants and terrorists who threaten us both. As Israel's Prime Minister, I promise you this: no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the road ahead, Israel will not relent. Israel will not bend. We will defend our land. We will defend our people. We will fight until we achieve victory. Victory over liberty, rather victory of liberty over tyranny, victory of life over death, victory of good over evil. That's our solemn commitment. And we will continue to work with the United States and our Arab partners to transform a troubled region from a backwater of repression, poverty, and war into a thriving oasis of dignity, prosperity, and peace. In this noble mission, as in many others, Israel will always remain America's indispensable ally. Through thick and thin, in good times and in bad, Israel will always be your loyal friend and your steadfast partner. On behalf of the people of Israel, I came here today to say thank you, America. Thank you for your support and solidarity. Thank you for standing in Israel, with Israel, in our hour of need. Together we shall defend our common civilization. Together we shall secure a brilliant future for both our nations. May God bless Israel, may God bless America, and may God bless the great alliance between Israel and America forever.
Thanks to America, his needs from America, and how Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel and the U.S. must work together. For a moment there, he did have a standing ovation, but now we started to hear a few of the boos, a few of the chanting, a few of the negative quips coming from within the chamber here, where the majority of lawmakers stood up and gave the Israeli Prime Minister a standing ovation, but we definitely must note the dozens of lawmakers that did not show up to shake the Israeli Prime Minister's hand and to show support for his visit here and to listen to his speech and his call on America to continue to be an ally and stand by his side for the sake of destroying Hamas. Let's bring in our Jay O'Brien. He is there on the Hill. He was listening from inside. Our Matt Gutman is at those protests outside the Capitol. There were definitely developments there. Matt Rivers is in Tel Aviv, where we've seen the protests there as well. Also, our ABC contributor and former CIA officer Daryl Blocker is with us. All right, Jay, let's start with you. As you listened, as you observed, it was interesting how the Prime Minister started with the hostages, which, of course, those lives on everybody's mind, no matter what. Okay, actually, Jay, stay with me. We're going to head to Matt Gutman as this speech wrapped up. The protests have also picked up. Matt Gutman, talk to us. Where are you? What's going on?
Kira, right outside Union Station here, and behind us, A squad of riot police came because protesters had taken the American flag down from this flagpole. They tried to take it down. Those riot police came in, took it back from them, and now they're being absolutely mobbed by these protesters. About 5,000 people turned out today, perhaps more or less, chanting Free Palestine, demanding that Netanyahu inside be arrested. And by and large, it's been peaceful, but there have been these sort of small eruptions of violence or fisticuffs with officers, Capitol Police deployed pepper spray about an hour ago, and now this happened. And it seems that protesters are chasing, or at least following, this squad of riot police. We're not exactly sure how this is going to end, but everywhere around us, Kira, we are ringed with police.
Kids are dying. Free Palestine. Get your hands off them.
Everywhere around us, they are surrounded by cops, by Capitol Police, federal police as well. We'll toss it back to you, Kira.
And Matt, just seeing exactly what's happening with the protesters around you, clearly protesters that were not listening to the Israeli prime minister and the speech that he was giving there on the floor in front of lawmakers. But it's not just protesters there. On the outside, there were dozens of lawmakers that protested and didn't show up to listen to what the Israeli prime minister had to say. When you look at the protests there where you are, Matt, can you give us a sense for how large the protests are? Okay.
Give me a sec. I don't know.
Okay, we're with you, Matt. Okay, all right, we're going to give him just a moment there to get things together. Clearly, this is a volatile time. It's a volatile issue. We have seen the protests from college campuses to around the country, and those standing up for the lives that have been lost in Gaza, but also protesting Israel and the IDF and the forces that have been there, as we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu say, he is not going to stand down till he sees the end of Hamas, till he sees the end of that terrorist organization that, as we heard the Prime Minister say, holds the innocent people hostage by their terrorism. Let's get back to our Matt Gutman, where the protests continue. Matt, first of all, are you okay? And can you just give us a sense for the protests right now that the speech has wrapped up?
You know, it's really hot out here. It's incredibly humid, Kira, and tempers are flaring, and you might have seen that behind us. People have been marching for over 4 hours now. And so what you're seeing behind me is still that group that has dogged the riot police as they detained, looks like this man right there. He's being led into a police car. They detained him allegedly for taking down the flag at that flagpole outside Union Station. You can hear them chanting, "Let them go, let them go." And they're mobbing that officer. I don't know if they're going to be able to get him inside the cruiser. This is probably the most testy it's been since this began, with speeches by a really broad and diverse array of speakers, from Jill Stein, the Green Party leader, to members of various unions, including the Postal Workers Union, the UAW as well, Palestinian groups, Jewish groups as well. So it's been incredibly diverse here, and this is pretty much the most intense we've seen. And it's unclear. Oh, and right now there's stun grenades being put out, or some sort of sound bombs, and they're raising the Palestinian flag at that flagpole, and you are hearing what appear to be stun grenades or firecrackers going off just on the other side. There are a number of Palestinian flags being raised over there, and the crowd, you can hear, is cheering very loudly right now. Looks like police are still trying to gain control of this area where they've detained a number of people. They're creating a cordon around the people they've detained, and the crowd seems to have backed off a little bit. I think it's clear that police are probably not going to take this too lightly if there's even a modicum of violence at this point. You might be able to hear them, Kira. They're chanting, shame on you," as they continue to try to detain that man. Now got him behind her, getting him behind the barricades. And just take a look at this, give you a sense of how many officers there are here. And I'm going to turn around down here and on the other side as well, dozens and dozens of officers. And of course, that crowd still jubilant after having raised the Palestinian flags on that flagpole over there. We're going to walk over there in that direction, Kira.
Okay, and as you're moving that to that direction, we should point out you're in
me.
front of Union Station right now, which is a pretty
That's
good
right.
walk, to the steps of the Capitol there. We should probably point that out, that, you know, unlike the day of the insurrection where people were able to protest and then storm the steps of the Capitol, there has definitely been a perimeter set up for these protests not to get, yeah, go ahead, bring us inside, but not to get so close to the Capitol.
No, we're just telling. You're 100% right. There was an incredible amount of trepidation among Capitol Police, federal agencies, and local. There have been thousands of security officers and police here, and they did not want a redo of January 7th. So they over-prepared. There were bicycle racks, there were barriers, there were scaling walls, there were dump trucks, tow trucks, snow plows in the roads, everything that blocked the boulevards to prevent people from even getting close to the Capitol, as you just mentioned. Right now, it seems that the protesters have set something on fire. They're cheering around it as well. We actually thought just a few minutes ago, Kira, that this whole thing was fizzling out. Again, it's incredibly hot, you can see, and people are tired and dehydrated. But it has just picked up in terms of intensity over the past couple of minutes here, Kira. It still seems that, by and large, though, law enforcement has control over this crowd.
All right, Matt Gutman, indeed, please keep us posted on the protests there as you get a chance also to talk to those that are there. I guess one more question, Matt. You know, since you have had a chance to talk with these protesters, what's your sense? Is it about the lives being lost in Gaza? Is it about Benjamin Netanyahu being here in the U.S.? Is it about, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, have you found a common theme in these protesters? Because as you know, when we covered these protests from campus to campus, there were protesters we talked to that didn't even understand the history between Israel and Hamas, and you know, what these two countries have been, you know, dealing with just for decades. Do you get a sense for the age, the understanding of those that are out here today? What is it exactly they tell you they are protesting?
I think that the coherent message, if one exists, is that Benjamin Netanyahu should not be speaking before a joint session of Congress. He is a leader of a country that these people believe is perpetrating a genocide. That is not something I'm saying. That is what the crowd here has been chanting for hours now. And they don't think that the United States or its government should welcome him. So I think if there's an overarching message, it is that he should be banished and perhaps arrested, as is the title of this protest march today, Arrest Netanyahu. And that has been sort of the goal of this crowd, to try to surround the Capitol, to prevent him from speaking, to disrupt him whenever and however possible. And they've certainly done that by making a tremendous amount of noise. I think it's also to raise awareness about what's happening in Gaza, the incredible loss of life there, the destruction of that small strip of land, about 140 square miles. And again, reasserting that terrible loss of life and trying to create more awareness for the American public in general, Kira.
Which, no matter what side you're on, you don't want to witness innocent people dying for no reason. We've seen the famine, we've seen the deaths, we've seen the families and the children in Gaza, and it's heart-wrenching. Okay, our Matt Gutman, thank you so much. So appreciate just a gut check from outside the Capitol there near Union Station and the protests that continue. Jay O'Brien, I want to take it to you now. Inside the Capitol, look, there were protests there on the floor. That the protest being the lawmakers that didn't show, that do not support the Israeli Prime Minister and what he is doing and how he is leading his country and this war against Hamas. However, with that said, there were dozens of lawmakers that do support what Netanyahu is doing, and they were there to tell him that, and they did that by a standing ovation.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to unpack in all of this. First, there was this speculation as to how full would the chamber be, given the number of Democrats who had said they would not be there, to your point, in protest. And the chamber was full, both with lawmakers and their guests, and even some guests of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Elon Musk was a guest of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He wasn't referenced in the speech, but there were a number of guests of the Prime Minister that were IDF soldiers that got a standing ovation from the crowd. A hostage from Gaza who was rescued that also got a standing ovation, that was sitting up in the gallery with the Prime Minister's wife. And the list goes on and on. We're getting some of the numbers, though, of Democrats specifically who have skipped this speech. According to our Lauren Peller, our producer, who is sitting there inside the chamber, more than 100 House Democrats by our count were not there. Obviously, there are 200 plus House Democrats in the House of Representatives, and then about 21 Senate Democrats were not there. A little less than half of the Senate Democratic caucus. That gives you a sense of the lawmakers who were not there. Nancy Pelosi was among them, for instance. Jim Clyburn, a top Biden ally, was not there. Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she was there. She's the only Palestinian American in Congress. She was there, Kira, in protest, and our producers inside the chamber tell me that she was holding a small sign, that on the sign, you're seeing it there on your screen, said war criminal. She kept that up over the course of Netanyahu's remarks. At one point, I'm told, a member of the House floor staff walked over to her, asked her to put the sign down. It's unclear if she did or so for a moment, but then she put it right back up. So that was really the only protest, if you will, demonstration, anything anti-Netanyahu that we saw inside that chamber. We were expecting disruptions. We didn't see any beyond that sign.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. Stay close. Matt Rivers, let's take it to you in Tel Aviv. You are just outside the U.S. consulate where there were protests taking place while the Israeli Prime Minister was speaking here before lawmakers at our nation's capital. How are things now? What are people telling you? Were they listening to this speech?
Yeah, people were very much paying attention to this speech. In fact, after we were at the U.S. consulate, we made our way here to what's become known as Hostage Square in the middle of Tel Aviv. It's a constant reminder of all of the hostages that remain in Gaza. This was an event behind me that just wrapped up that was led by hostage families. And at the same time people were speaking, they actually had Netanyahu's speech kind of on a split screen on the stage behind the speakers at this event with subtitles there in Hebrew. So people were very much watching. And what they heard from Bibi Netanyahu was just about everything that we've heard from him before. We heard him play on themes of patriotism, of how Israel is a multi-ethnic coalition of people fighting what he calls barbarism around the world. He says that Israel stands up in this part of the world so America doesn't have to. He talks about IDF heroism. He talks about what happened on October 7th. He talked about how he's making progress in his ceasefire deal, but didn't exactly lay out what that meant. Nothing that he said, really, was new. And that is something that people here were frustrated about. They wanted him to start that speech by saying, I come here to tell you that we are about to sign a deal to have a ceasefire and to bring the hostages home. That's not what people heard tonight, and that's why people here in Israel, many people, will continue to be frustrated by Netanyahu. Many people at this event feel that Netanyahu going and speaking in front of Congress the way he did was an act of self-interest rather than what he should be doing, which would be, in their view, to be here to continue to prosecute the war and to get a ceasefire deal signed. That is not what they heard tonight. And so the frustration, the helplessness that a lot of these families have felt for nearly 300 days now will continue.
All right, Matt, appreciate you so much. And before we take a quick break, Daryl Blocker, former CIA field operative, I want to take it to you. What do you make about the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and towards the end of the speech there, laying out his vision of what he called a new Gaza, making the point that they wanted to keep a presence there to maintain security, but they also want to do that until what he said, that Gaza can be run by Palestinians that do not want to destroy Israel and wipe it off the face of the earth?
I thought the Prime Minister's speech of the four that he's given Ben Congress was probably one of the best. He gave out shout outs to the Biden administration for what they've done. He was clearly trying to walk a fine line between criticizing one administration and playing into U.S. politics. His vision of Gaza is sound. The people who don't understand the difference between Hamas and the Palestinians writ large, don't understand that when they're supporting Hamas, they are supporting Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. When you're raising a Palestinian flag after taking down an American flag, what you're doing is you're feeding into the Ayatollah's dreams. So please keep that in mind. And Bibi Netanyahu does not represent 100% of Israel. They are marching against him. So keep that in mind when the politics start to raise its head.
Daryl, Matt, and Jay, gentlemen, thank you so much. And right after a break, in studio with me, a woman who was held captive by Hamas for 51 days. You will hear from Aviva Siegel and what she thought of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech right after this.
Wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights wherever you stream your news. Only on ABC News Live. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about, the migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
There is a price to be paid every time a survivor shares their story. I will not be silenced.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
I wouldn't say accepted it as so much pretended it didn't exist.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Kira Phillips with ABC News. Does your church protect sexual predators?
The powerful new Impact by Nightline. Secrets of the 2x2 Church.
There's nothing pretty about hearing this.
Now streaming on Hulu.
Tonight on ABC News Live, President Biden for the first time addresses the nation after ending his bid for re-election and endorsing Kamala Harris. David Muir reporting. President Biden, the decision, streaming tonight on ABC News Live.
Here's to good mornings in America.
Can you feel the love?
Oh, yeah. Mornings that inspire, filled with hope, kindness, joyous surprises, and so much fun.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Start your day with Good Morning America's Ray of Sunshine, highlighting the best of America and helping
make dreams come true.
Wow.
I'm just so happy. It's so good.
Get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America, because
you know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
So glad you're streaming with us. Well, as you know, it's been nearly 10 months since that horrific attack by Hamas militants in Israel, sparking the war in Gaza. More than 1,000 families torn apart that day, their loved ones killed in cold blood. Hundreds more were taken hostage. The ensuing war claiming the lives of tens of thousands of people in Gaza, many of them just innocent civilians, children. And as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed that joint meeting of Congress just moments ago, the families of the dozens of hostages still held by Hamas are holding out hope for a deal to free their loved ones. Joining me now in studio is a woman who was actually held captive by Hamas for 51 days and whose husband is still being held hostage. Aviva Siegel joining me now. Thank you so much for being with me. And I see the yellow ribbon pin. We saw a number of lawmakers there on the floor wearing those pins, even Benjamin Netanyahu himself wearing that pin as he gave that speech. I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your husband. But first, if you could just tell me what you thought of the Israeli Prime Minister's speech to Congress just now.
I didn't go. I decided not to go. And I just cannot understand and cannot believe in such a critical moment that Netanyahu is here and not home. He should be home in Israel, caring about Keith and all the 120 hostages, and what's happening in Israel is terrible. It's just terrible. So sad. So sad.
He mentioned, the first thing he mentioned the hostages at the beginning of the speech. Does that give you any sense of encouragement or peace of mind, since that was the first thing that he mentioned? Did you think that that was genuine?
I'm doing everything I can not to hold on things like that, sentences like that, until I won't see Keith with my eyes and being able to hug him and see that he's okay and to see that he's alive. I'm not there yet.
I know that video was released, I believe it was back in April, of your husband. Could you look at that? Were you able to look at that?
No, I decided not to see the video because I felt like I won't be able to see it, that I won't be able to see the sadness in his eyes, because I know exactly where he is and what he's going through.
I know you say that Benjamin Netanyahu should not be here, but for a moment, let's talk about the relationship between Israel and the United States and the amount of aid that the U.S. has been giving Israel to fight this war against Hamas. The speech given on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu was very much a plea that we need you. We need all of you lawmakers, is basically what he was saying, to continue to vote to support us. We need the money. We need the support. We need the weapons. I am not giving up until I destroy Hamas. Does that give you any sense of peace? Are you happy with any part of that cry for support? Does it validate in any way Netanyahu being here in your eyes?
I just want to say that the leaders of the world have been chosen by us, by people, to lead this world in a better way. And killing should not be allowed. There should not be wars. The leaders should handle life and things that happen between countries in a different way. I'm against killing.
If you are against killing, Hamas has killed so many innocent people. So, in your eyes, how does Hamas need to be dealt with?
Biden needs to be the strongest person in earth and to show them in any way that they can't lead the world. The terrorists and Hamas cannot lead this world. And that's what they're doing. They're leading the world to be a terrible world. Keith and 120 hostages are there suffering so badly. The stories that I've been telling of being there are the worst things that any human should go through. Any human. And Keith is still there. Keith is an American citizen. And I want to ask Biden, please, there's 8 citizens, American citizens, and you should get them out. If Bibi can't get them out, you should get them out. It's your responsibility. Keith is American. He was brought up in North Carolina. His mom is 97 years old in North Carolina, and we're doing everything we can not to let her know what's happening to her son. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because Keith doesn't even know how she is. And I'm sure that he's so worried about her. And while we were there, one of the things that he said, the first thing, when I get out, I want to hug my mom.
How did you meet your husband, Keith?
The minute I saw him, I fell in love with him. I was 19. I've been married for 43 years. And I've been there for Keith. And Keith, there, was the best person. If get kidnapped with Keith, because he was perfect. He helped me in every way, and now there's nobody there for him. And I'm not there for him, but I do know that I'm doing everything I can. Everything I can. I've been to the States. 7 times. I've met Biden. I've met Blinken at least 7 times. And I'm begging. I'm begging. I think this war, for me, is so cruel. To think that Keith is still there, lying on a mattress, just like a rug, with no human rights at all.
When you two were taken by Hamas, how long were you together before you were separated? I'm sorry if you don't want to talk about it. I completely understand.
No, that's
okay. If you can take us back to that moment so we can sort of understand how long you were together, how you became separated, and then, of course, the moment that you saw, freedom's door, and he didn't.
Keith and I were together for 50 days. I was lucky. I was just so lucky that he was with me, because I don't know how I would have handled it without Keith.
How did he keep you strong? What did he say to you?
He just helped. We weren't allowed to talk. We had to keep quiet all the time. But even just the love of his eyes was so much for me. And I didn't feel alone. Even though for at least 5 weeks, I couldn't even touch him because they broke his ribs. And even with the finger, if I used to touch him, it was so sore for him. And they used to force him to sit part of the day while I begged them, give him 5 minutes just to relax his body. And they didn't. And the last day, when I separated from Keith, I was in a complete and utterly shock, because he said, you need to come with me. And I said, no, I'm not going without Keith. And I argued with him until I understood who I'm arguing with. And I got up and I said, I'm going to say goodbye to Keith. And he said, no, you're not. Keith is sleeping. But I knew that Keith wasn't sleeping because we arrived there 5 minutes before. And I went to the room that Keith was there. He was lying on the floor on a filthy, dirty mattress. And he was sad. And I bent down to him and I gave him a hug. And I looked at him in his eyes. And I said, you be strong for me and I'll be strong for you. Not knowing where I'm going, not knowing if I'll ever see Keith again. And the only moment that I knew that I'm coming back to Israel is when I met the first army person, the soldier that was in the army. And that was a very difficult day. And you said, freedom. I'm still in Gaza most of the time. And if I'm not, then I'm most of the time thinking about Keith and the girls that I was with. And I'm so worried about them.
That moment, and I'm assuming it was a member of Hamas that came to get you, is that right? Did that person tell you why you were about to be released?
He did, but I didn't
say?
believe him. He said, you tomorrow, Israel. And I said, but why me and not Keith? And he said, Israel gave your name. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe them at all. They used to lie all the time. And that whole day, before we went out, the Hamas people came to us all the time and said, no Israel anymore. They had been saying that for 51 days, no Israel anymore. Israel has been bombed from the whole world. You're not going home. So I didn't believe them. I didn't know what to think. But I'm alive, and I'm lucky to be alive. And I'm lucky to be back because of Biden. And I want to thank Biden for everything that he did to free me. And I want to ask him to free Keith and the 8 Americans, please.
I'll go back to Keith and the other Americans, the other hostages. Did you ever find out from Biden or Blinken or anybody else why you were chosen to be freed?
I know that the girls, the women, and the children were taken out, even though that I know that the Bibas children are still there, and there's still lots of girls there. And I'm very, very worried about them.
And I'm going to say when, not if. When your husband is brought home, when those other hostages are brought home, what do you want to see happen to Hamas? Would you support violence at that point?
No, I want the Gaza people, all the good Gaza people, to have a better life. People live once. They need to have a better life. And I want them for that. I want them for all the people in the world to have a better life and not to worry about what's going to happen. My daughter has 3 children, my grandchildren, and they need to grow as if somebody's looking after them. Whatever happens to them, there needs to be somebody that will look after them and take care. And it doesn't look like that's what's happening now. So I'm very, very worried about what's happening in Israel and the world. Look what happened to Trump. And I connect it because I think that by letting terrorists do what they want to, touch girls when they want to, hit and in such a brutal way, behave to Keith like they did. He's 65 years old. And it seems like the world is just letting that happen. The world needs to be strong enough to stop that. And then people maybe won't just shoot Trump if they feel like it, because it seems like people can do whatever they want to, wherever they want to. Somebody needs to lead the world. People are not allowed to do what they want to.
I have to ask you, and I know I can't even imagine being in the position that you were in, Aviva, but when you were witnessing just the beating and the treatment of you and those around you, was there ever a moment that you asked any of these members of Hamas, these terrorists, you know, why do you do what you do? Why are you doing this? Was there ever a moment that you saw an ounce of humanity in these people?
I, for 51 days, shaked from fear all the time. I was so scared of them. And there was a cloud of death above me all the time. And there were so many moments, going through those moments of seeing them, hitting the girls, touching them, and treating Keith like they did. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. And it's very human to scream or to shout, to say, why did you do that? But I had to keep quiet. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever gone through.
I can't even imagine. That would be my first reaction too. And then, you know, you look at, you're helpless.
Yeah.
You have no voice.
Yeah.
Keith, you fell in love with him at the age of 19. You've been married for decades. Just tell us about him. What do you want the world to know about him? I'm sure you've been asked this before, but enlighten me, enlighten everyone that's watching right now. I just look at his picture on your T-shirt and he warms my heart.
Keith is such a gentle sweetheart. He's a person's people. He talks to everybody. Sometimes you have to be careful not to go past him because he'll talk to you. He's that kind of person. He won't even kill a fly. And he's just the sweetest, gentle. If I'll ask for apples, he won't bring me one. He'll bring me 20. And this picture was taken 3 weeks before we got kidnapped. My younger daughter got engaged. And it was one of our happiest moments. Keith is so happy. And my grandchild, that's 8, she drew the tikka on Keith because he likes India and Indian food. I was painted all over. And when I was in captivity all those 51 days, I used to say to myself, I might not see my daughter get married because I might be dead. And when I came out, that was one of the first things when I hugged her. I said, Sheil, I'm going to be at your wedding, but I'm going to be there. But I won't be there if Keith won't be there.
I hope. I'm not even going to say I hope. The next time I talk to you, we're going to talk about all the apples that Keith has brought you, and we're going to talk about how he walked your daughter down the aisle.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Aviva Siegel, thank you so much for just being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your heart, and I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you so much.
You're a strong woman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aviva. We'll be right back.
whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming.
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight, police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about, the migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning
America's #1 early morning news.
on ABC News Live.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here. What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag.
Not a tear in it.
How important it made to USA. Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail? David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Hey, good morning, America. Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Are you ready? Covering the biggest events in the country right now.
There's a lot going on here this morning.
You don't just see it, you feel it.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
I'll be here.
I am here and so happy.
I'm in.
I'm in too.
Michael, George, Clara, Ginger.
So glad you're streaming with us, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Honor and sacrifice. Those words from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he addressed Congress, the Israeli leader looking to lock down American support as the U.S. enters a critical election time.
If you remember one thing from the speech, remember this. Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory.
More than 50 lawmakers noticeably absent during that speech, including Vice President Kamala Harris. She's actually set to meet with Netanyahu tomorrow, following a separate meeting with President Biden. Also absent, Republican vice presidential candidate Senator J.D. Vance. The visit drawing more than criticism, but large crowds have also been convening around Capitol Hill, prompting several arrests across the city. Protests even erupting at the hotel where Netanyahu is staying. Our Jay O'Brien is there on Capitol Hill. He is joined by our contributor and former senior CIA field operative Daryl Blocker. Also, our Matt Rivers outside the U.S. consulate there in Tel Aviv, Israel. Actually, Matt, I think you did have to move. I'll get to you in just a second on where exactly you are now. But Jay, let's start with you. Your key takeaways from Netanyahu's speech.
Well, first, as we've been discussing, there were 100+ House Democrats who skipped this, more than 20 Senate Democrats who skipped this in protest. But nonetheless, the room was relatively full, and Netanyahu got a positive reception from the lawmakers who went into that room. There were numerous standing ovations, particularly from House Republicans. It was clear that Mike Johnson wanted to bring Netanyahu here to make this exact case to the men and women of the United States Congress. And one line that Netanyahu said really stuck out to me, and it was, quote, "Give us the tools faster," the operative word being faster, "and we'll finish the job faster." He's referring there to U.S. military assistance, which has been a thorny issue in this Congress, assistance for not just Israel, but also for Ukraine. There was aid for Israel to the tune of tens of billions of dollars in a recent foreign aid package, but we know this issue is going to come up again, and the Biden administration, separate to what's been appropriated by Congress, has also given military assistance to Israel, but at least once it's been stalled. Those massive munitions, those large bombs, were paused in shipments to Israel when there was consternation over whether or not Israel was going to mount that additional offensive into Rafah, which Netanyahu ultimately ended up doing. So what Netanyahu was saying there to the men and women of the United States Congress was, give us military assistance faster. But he was also saying that to the Biden administration, which we know was watching at home, as this issue is really a political football, Kira.
And Daryl, notably, Vice President Harris not in the room, as well as Senator J.D. Vance. Several progressive Democrats also skipping out as the only Palestinian American in Congress. Representative Rashida Tlaib held a sign that we see there, war criminal. Talk to us about the significance of the absences.
The absences, I don't think were particularly that noteworthy. I don't think anyone that wasn't there is going to be a surprise to either side, Israel or on the political front. It is important to note that Vice President Biden, at the time in 2015, when Netanyahu last spoke, also was absent from his speech before Congress. So people have already clearly chosen their sides, but for them to be there and to support the United States and its efforts to support clearly one of our closest allies is a good thing. And we will work through this together. The intelligence communities are not divided, and we will win. And winning is depending on who defines it. But winning, in my sense, is that the killing stops, that the hostages come home, and that we move towards a two-state solution in the region.
Matt, in much of his address, Netanyahu focusing on how Israel has been the target of unjust Hamas attacks and how Israel has been defeating our brutal enemies, requiring both courage and clarity. He also made these claims about trying to keep Palestinian civilians safe. Let's take a listen.
The ICC prosecutor accuses Israel of deliberately targeting civilians. What in God's green earth is he talking about? The IDF has dropped millions of flyers, sent millions of text messages, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way.
Matt, as you stand there outside Hostage Square, is there any evidence of this? And how is this even possible when so many parts of Gaza are completely demolished now?
Look, the IDF has sent all of those text messages. They have dropped the flyers. They have told people, move here, move here, move here, and people have done that. That doesn't negate the fact that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of civilians have been killed as a result of Israeli bombs. So he can say that Israel is doing everything in its power to protect civilians, but the fact is then they're failing at that because civilians continue to die en masse. So, you have plenty of people here in Israel who will tell you that's the realities of war, but the fact is that people, including children, are being killed by Israeli bombs. And throughout all of his speech, Netanyahu clearly trying to spin what Israel is doing in Gaza. He talked about trying to protect civilians, but civilians are still being killed. He talked about hunger, how there is no real hunger crisis in Gaza. That's just simply not true. The United Nations says that famine is, the threat of famine has now spread throughout the entire Gaza Strip. So that is also a continuing issue. So this is something that we've heard before from Netanyahu, justifying Israel's actions in Gaza, talking about how the IDF is doing everything it can, not only to feed people, but also to protect people. But the reality on the ground is just different than that.
And Jay, one of the most notable moments happened just before Netanyahu took to the mic. The Israeli prime minister walking past Democratic leader Chuck Schumer basically got dissed. There it is. No handshake. What did you make of that?
Neither of them outstretched their hands there, Kira. It was chilly, and that's because Chuck Schumer and Netanyahu have a frosty relationship now. Chuck Schumer is the head Democrat in the Senate. He's also the top Jewish elected official in this country, and he has said that he wants new leadership in Israel. He believes it's time for new elections and for Netanyahu to be gone. He has said, as it relates to that war in Gaza, that Netanyahu has, quote, lost his way, and that was even before the speech began. I'm also getting a little bit of reaction from members of Congress who were inside that room. I spoke with one who said he wanted Netanyahu to talk more about the future. He wanted to talk about the possible paths to peace, and he didn't hear that much out of Netanyahu. I've also gotten a statement from another congressman, Jimmy Gomez of California, who says he didn't hear what he wanted to hear from Netanyahu in that remark. He didn't hear anything that was forward-looking, anything that was a path to peace, and he's calling on Netanyahu to resign, Kira. So while there was positive reception to Netanyahu's remarks, particularly from Republicans who gave him a rousing standing ovation at multiple points during those remarks, we are hearing from Democrats who say they just weren't necessarily fully happy with what they heard out of the prime minister.
And Daryl, today's address marks Netanyahu's fourth speech before United States lawmakers, the most of any foreign leader, we should point out. And he, of course, took the opportunity to once again praise Biden.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten.
Daryl, do you see relations with Israel changing in any way? And please give me details once a new candidate is elected president.
Sarah, I'm sure that you know that my career spanned 6 presidential administrations, from President Reagan to President Trump, 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats. The intelligence community does not reshape its focus based on who is in the Oval. So I think the relationships will continue to be strong. They survived much worse than this, including Jewish Americans spying against the United States. They survived other flare-ups in the past. And no, I don't think that the relationship is going to change. The relationship is strong, it's solid, and it hopefully will continue.
And finally, Matt, I'm curious how Israelis there where you are, before there were protests, now that you've had a chance to talk with some of them as things have calmed down, what's the reaction overall to Netanyahu's speech?
Well, we know that Netanyahu has supporters throughout this country. He might not be a popular figure here in Israel, but his supporters obviously very much in favor of what he just did in the United States. But we spent the night with people who are not big fans of the prime minister, specifically those family members of hostages who are still being held in Gaza, who are absolutely livid with the fact that they believe that the biggest reason why a ceasefire deal hasn't been agreed to yet is Bibi Netanyahu, that they blame him for that. And what they were hoping to see him do was to go to the United States and to use this opportunity to talk about how a deal was imminent, how they hoped it was about to be struck, and that's not what they heard. What they heard from Netanyahu was more of the same. They heard a recap of October 7th. They heard about IDF heroism. They talked about trying to avoid civilian casualties. They talked about doing everything he can to bring the hostages home. And when I posed that question to a family member shortly after the speech, he said, "What do you mean he's doing everything he can to bring hostages home? The hostages are still there because of him." So that is very much the viewpoint of a lot of people in Israel, that this was a self-serving trip to the United States for Netanyahu. He wanted to get those rounds of applause, when in reality, in their opinion, he should be here where I am in Tel Aviv, focusing on getting those hostages home, not giving speeches abroad.
Jay O'Brien, Dale Bacher, also Matt Rivers, thank you all so much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. So Vice President Kamala Harris is in full campaign mode, no surprise, speaking today in Indianapolis before some 6,000 members of the historically black Zeta Phi Beta sorority incorporated. Harris attending the sorority's biannual conference there in Indiana one day after drawing a crowd of 3,000 pretty darn excited supporters during her first campaign rally in battleground Wisconsin.
Our nation needs your leadership once again. In this moment, I believe we face a choice between two different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
And as Harris kicks off her campaign with a lot of momentum, President Joe Biden is set to address the nation from the Oval Office tonight. The president expected to explain his decision as to why he withdrew from the 2024 race while attempting to rally voters behind Vice President Harris. Let's bring in our senior reporter, Catherine Falders, for more. So, Catherine, what are you hearing from the Harris campaign about just the enthusiasm surrounding her White House bid?
Oh, well, I think that's just it, Kira. I think there's a recognition of the enthusiasm surrounding her bid and also the realization that this is a very new campaign. They're starting this late. So the idea here is to, of course, keep momentum. And they believe they're doing that, of course, by staying on the campaign trail, doing events like the one you just played right there. And she needs to continue getting out on the road, holding these events. It's a big logistical hurdle, as you know, because she's jumping right into this and hitting the ground running. But I think you will see similar events like this to Harris, to what she just held today. And I have to say, our team that's been there on the ground has obviously noticed this complete shift in the campaign, essentially overnight, the enthusiasm that you see there on the ground. The question is, how does this translate into the polls? How is this translating to the American voters? I'm sure that's something that we will see in the coming days, Kira.
Now the question is former President Trump and his folks getting nervous? I mean, he's going to be holding a rally in North Carolina tonight, but I'll tell you what, the way Democrats are responding to Harris and looking at these rallies and hearing quite a different tone and energy has got to make Trump, I don't know, shaking his boots a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I know from sources close to Trump, I know you know this well, Kira, from reporting on him, is that this is something that makes him nervous. He didn't want Joe Biden to drop out of the race. He thought, and it was looking like, obviously, that Trump would win the election if he was running against Joe Biden. So this definitely has him behind the scenes with his political team trying to recalculate some of their moves, their attack strategy, if you will. Surely something that Trump didn't want to happen. So obviously Republicans and Trump are going on the defensive here, trying to, with whether it be their attack ads, the language that he's using. I'm curious to see what the former president says tonight during his rally. But one thing is clear, and you mentioned this is not who Donald Trump wanted to be running against this presidential election, Kira.
No, not at all. I think that he pretty much thought he had it in the bag if indeed he was going up against Joe Biden. So speaking of Biden, he is set to address the nation tonight for the first time since dropping out of the race. Let's talk about what's at stake and what's he expected to say. I think that Americans, well, I think a lot of people around the globe want to know what led to that decision for him to finally step aside.
Right, and we don't really know, right? We've seen that letter from President Biden that he released on Sunday. We haven't heard from the president since then. Of course, this is something that obviously makes sense for him to want to address the American people from the Oval Office, talk about the decisions that led up to this big decision, who he was talking to, why he came to this conclusion, and frankly, his hope for the future of Kamala Harris's campaign, but also his presidency. So it's not only a speech to the American people. This is a speech to the world leaders. I think lots of people will be tuning in to what the president has to say tonight. But again, the most critical and most important thing here is that we haven't heard from Joe Biden since he made that decision. This is his opportunity to essentially lay that out and address the American people on his path forward here, Kira.
All right, Catherine Falders, thank you. And President Biden's Oval Office address is set to begin 8 p.m. Eastern. Our special coverage of that kicks off right here on ABC News Live tonight. Thanks so much for streaming, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. The news never stops, neither do the live events, neither do the speeches. It's campaign mode, folks. It's going to be like this all the way to November. We'll be right back. More news on the other side.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it. Not a tear in it. How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work. Hi. Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, David. Good to meet you. Ismail? David.
David.
Yes, yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
The critics agree.
Hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium.
1985? I think we could have.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families.
On the ground in Ukraine.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Reporting from Arizona's state capital, I'm Elizabeth Schulze. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Some of the top headlines we're watching at ABC News Live for you this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing a joint meeting of Congress, paraphrasing Winston Churchill and telling lawmakers, give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster. He even praised President Biden, despite claiming earlier that this year he was withholding weapons for the war in Gaza. Take a listen.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel. After the savage attack on October 7th, he rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten.
Netanyahu's visit also drawing a lot of protests. Large crowds convening around Capitol Hill, prompting several arrests across the city. Protests even erupting at the hotel where Netanyahu is staying. Vice President Kamala Harris in full campaign mode, meanwhile, speaking before some 6,000 members of a historically black sorority. Harris attending the sorority's biannual conference in Indianapolis one day after drawing a crowd of 3,000 excited supporters during her first campaign rally in battleground Wisconsin.
Our nation needs your leadership once again. In this moment, I believe we face a choice between 2 different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
And as Harris kicks off her campaign with strong momentum, President Joe Biden set to address the nation from the Oval tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. He's expected to explain why he decided to withdraw from the 2024 race while attempting to rally voters behind his vice president. Be sure to tune in to our special coverage of Biden's address. It begins right here, 7 p.m. Eastern, ABC News Live. And the countdown is on to the Olympic opening ceremonies, which will float down the scene on Friday. Tennis star Coco Gauff will join LeBron James as a Team USA flag bearer. Gauff is the first tennis player ever to carry the star and stripes, and it'll actually be her Olympic debut. She had to sit out of the Tokyo Games back in 2021 after testing positive for COVID, but that's not the only Olympic news. Today, the IOC announced that the Winter Games will be returning to Salt Lake City in 2034. Thanks for streaming with us. I'm Kira Phillips. ABC News Live is here for you anytime with the latest news, context, and analysis. You can always find us on your favorite streaming service, the ABC News app, and of course on abcnews.com. The news never stops. GMA 3 starts right now.
What you need to know right now on GMA 3. President Biden addressing the nation tonight from the Oval Office about his decision to drop out of the race as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaks to both houses of a divided Congress. And Vice President Harris and former President Trump make their case to the American people, hitting the campaign trail hard.
Delta meltdown, the new apology. The Department of Transportation says the airline's ongoing issues following the CrowdStrike outage have impacted 500,000 people. Senator Maria Cantwell, who chairs the Commerce Committee, joins us here with the latest. And Health Alert, the new medical study sounding the alarm on cannabis use during pregnancy.
The home makeover turning deeply personal. The Broadway star sharing his journey as he renovates a 200-year-old home.
And in today's Prime playlist, rapper Bryson Tiller gets candid about his music career as he climbs the charts.
It's time to refresh your skincare routine. Tori Johnson is here with deals on beauty products for a healthy summer glow. And is she coming back? Music legend Celine Dion touches down in Paris. Fans asking, will she take the world stage as the Olympics get underway?
Now from Times Square, Eva Pilgrim and DeMarco Morgan with What You Need to Know.
This is a good Wednesday song.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to What You Need to Know on this Wednesday. ABC's Trevor Alt is in for DeMarco today.
Hi. You know, I realized as we sat down looking down, I was like, oh, I'm definitely the dumbest person on this desk.
That's not true.
Sure.
Not at all.
Yes.
Trevor is actually very, very smart.
If they have to say actually,
no.
that's usually an
He's
indicator where
being
you
very humble right now. We appreciate, that's one of the things we like about you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be with Dr. Sutton, too.
It's great to be here. Great to have you.
Thank you.
We have to ask you some questions about some of the medical headlines right now. This one is really interesting. A new study sounding the alarm on cannabis use and pregnancy. Break this down for us.
Well, with the legalization of marijuana or cannabis, more and more are using it, and more are asking, what are the effects on pregnancy? So I just think that this study is so interesting because it has some important results. It screens over 250,000 women in California, and 20,000 women have reported either testing positive for cannabis or using cannabis. And they found that those who use had an increased risk of hypertension or high blood pressure by 17%, and additional complications like preeclampsia, as well as risk of placental abruption. Now, these are medical emergencies that can negatively affect not just the baby, but also the mother. There is so much that we don't know about the effects of cannabis, and unfortunately, we don't have data yet, and this is the beginning of it.
I feel like that's kind of a lot of the areas with cannabis use, too, as we've just started to see more and more of it. But that's definitely important for all the people that are
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's unclear the dose, the frequency that gets to these results. But what is clear is that there's no proven dose that is proven to be safe. And so as we get more data and research, hopefully we'll be able to counsel patients on the risk.
Right.
So for now, do not use it at all.
For now, I'd recommend against it. And if you do think that you need it, because there are those who use it for medicinal reasons, of course, have an open conversation with your provider so that they fully understand what you're into.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate it, Dr. Sutton. Let's get to another genius in the studio with us. We have Morgan Norwood here with the latest headlines.
Oh, go on. Good to see you guys. Good to be with you. But we do have a lot of headlines. And let's start with Vice President Kamala Harris hitting the campaign trail with her first rally in the key battleground state of Wisconsin. It comes as a new Reuters Ipsos poll showing her with a slight lead in a head-to-head matchup with former President Donald Trump. Harris will speak today in Indiana and Texas. All of this as speculation grows over her possible choice of a running mate. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is expected to detail why he dropped out of the race and his plans going forward. That's when he addresses the nation tonight from the Oval Office. Both President Biden and Vice President Harris are set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow after Netanyahu's joint address to Congress later today. The Capitol, though, bracing for ceasefire protests ahead of that address. And of course, we'll have complete live coverage of President Biden's remarks tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on ABC. Now let's talk about that powerful eruption caught on camera at Biscuit Basin in Yellowstone National Park. Debris raining down on visitors, and scientists are calling the hydrothermal explosion a random event. Park officials, though, say thankfully no one was injured, but the boardwalk that tourists use to get close to that landmark destroyed in some places. Now let's go to our Ginger Z for the latest on the weather.
We've had that stationary front draped over the southeast really living up to its name. It has not budged much, and so it's creating a lot of flash flooding. This is Cobb County, Georgia. They had some water rescues there. We're going to see more of that action from, say, Beaumont, Texas, which is about 20 inches above average year to date, all the way up to Virginia Beach. Also wanted to mention Jasper, Alberta. This is in Canada. At least 25,000 people have been evacuated because of wildfires. Now, Canada has nearly 1,000 large wildfires burning. We've got 65 plus in the U.S., and that's creating a lot of smoke on top of the fire danger. So that unhealthy air quality from Denver today over to, say, Minneapolis and Iowa by tomorrow.
Got it, Ginger. Thank you. Well, Celine Dion fans are really hoping the rumors are true. Will she perform this week on one of the world's biggest stages, the Paris Olympics? Well, the star touching down there amid growing talk of a special performance at opening ceremonies. It would be her first performance since her devastating stiff person syndrome diagnosis. Certainly hoping and looking forward to that. We'll find out soon whether she will take the stage, but certainly hoping that she's doing well, but would love to hear her voice again.
Yes, we are all cheering for her.
Yeah,
for sure.
and it would be, I mean, her songs are moving enough already, but especially so for the Olympics. Morgan, thank you very much. We still have much more to get to ahead here on GMA3 on this Wednesday, including that Delta meltdown and the apology today. The Senate Commerce Committee chair's digging into the matter, and she joins us here with the latest.
And transforming a slavery-era house into a loving home. Robert Hartwell is here breaking new ground. Stay with us.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
There is a price to be paid every time a survivor shares their story. I will not be silenced.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
I wouldn't say accepted it as so much pretended it didn't exist.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
Ready? Kira Phillips with ABC News. Does your church protect sexual predators?
The powerful new Impact by Nightline. Secrets of the 2x2 Church.
There's nothing pretty about hearing this.
Now streaming on Hulu.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're going to love it.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Welcome back to GMA3. We know that travelers are still feeling the impact of that critical tech breakdown, which began on Friday. Crucial software from a company called CrowdStrike failed on a massive scale. It impacted banks, hospitals, and airlines, too.
Yeah, well, many airlines have mostly resumed normal service. Delta has not, leaving tens of thousands of people stranded and drawing the attention of the federal government. This morning, Delta's CEO said normal service should resume tomorrow. Here to tell us more about the situation is Senate Commerce Committee Chair Senator Maria Cantwell. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good afternoon.
So I'm curious, what is going on with Delta and why were they so negatively impacted by all this?
Well, we'll find out the details of their system and how to update software and what